Today, we're gonna talk about the people who create magic with their hands. And I gotta hand it to me, that's a pretty good concept for a video, and a pretty good joke. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. Those of you who decided not to leave after the nonsense I said right before that intro. Welcome to my video on the Artisans of Magic the Gathering. There is an incredible card in Commander 2019 that led me down this rabbit hole, and I have decided that we shall take a look at the unsung Artisans of Magic the Gathering. So let us dive right in. All right, my friends, we are starting out with the artisan that truly caught my eye. This is the Doomed Artisan from the Commander 2019. Now, this is the first time he's existed. This is not a reprint card. The flavor behind this card is incredible, enough so that it led me down this path. So, 1 white, 2 colors for a 1/1 human artificer. Sculptures you control can't attack or block. At the beginning of your end step, create a colorless sculpture artifact creature token with this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of sculptures you control. And the flavor text says, remember me not as I am, but as I should have been. And I absolutely adore the concept behind this card. The name actually can tie in multiple ways. One way that he could be doomed is that these statues that he's creating, he's imbuing part of his life essence into them, and after a certain point, these sculptures actually end up taking on real life and attacking him, so he is doomed in that regard. There is also the doomed concept of, well, obviously as a player, you're going to accumulate more and more of these sculptures as he's out. Each turn you're going to be getting a sculpture token, and they're all going to grow larger and larger. But as you can see on the card, sculptures you control can't attack or block. Now, as soon as the Doomed Artisan isn't in play, you're going to be able to attack with those creatures. So you're going to have a high incentive to get rid of this artisan, either through attacking with them, blocking with them, or more likely some kind of sack outlet. So you have his days are numbered. It's guaranteed. But the flavor behind this is just amazing. You can see him, he is actually sculpting multiple images of himself as he was meant to be. And when you actually take a close look at the artwork, you can see that there are scars running across him and scars running all across these sculptures as well. He is trying to sculpt the perfect version of himself. This is someone whose soul is so troubled that he got into art as a creative outlet, and he expresses that by trying to create a more noble version of himself. He's trying to create a sculpture of himself that lacks the flaws that he as a human possesses. And that is an interesting and noble and tragic concept. Overall, the artwork is very striking. The flavor of the card is amazing. For anybody who didn't know, artisans are basically people who create high quality goods mainly using their hands, okay? So that's usually how the term is used. And we will see there are a variety of artisans, but this one in particular just struck me as the whole troubled artist trying to escape himself through creation, but ultimately it's futile and he is doomed. That is amazing, amazing flavor. Now we're gonna flip the script and go to ridiculousness. We're gonna take a look at the Goblin Artisans. These guys are all the way back from antiquities, and this is just a hilarious concept, and admittedly, it kind of steps outside of the normal magical world in that they seem to be wearing modern day construction hats. So what are they? 1 red gets you a 1/1 goblin, and they're considered an artificer now. That's their creature type. You can tap it, flip a coin. If you win the flip, you draw a card. If you lose the flip, you counter target artifact spell you control that isn't the target of an ability from another creature named Goblin Artisans. That's the new Oracle wording. The original wording on the card says, you may tap Goblin Artisans as you cast an artifact, then flip a coin. Opponent calls heads or tails while the coin is in the air. If the flip ends up in your opponent's favor, your artifact is countered Otherwise, draw another card from your library. You can use this ability once only for each time you've cast an artifact. Good lord, trying to come up with new oracle wordings for these old cards is difficult. I like the artwork though. I like the bickering goblins arguing over how something's getting created and how sometimes it can lead to inspiration and more creativity, and at other times you just end up with a destroyed artifact. That's what happens. So I enjoy the flavor of this. Admittedly, it is outside the normal spectrum of Magic artwork. This is back when they had more leeway. You can see a screwdriver on the counter. You can see the one goblin in the back is eating paste. One of the goblins is going to knock himself in the head. And another interesting note is the goblin, like, who I assume is the foreman, the guy who's in charge of all this, his ears are actually like dragon wings, which is pretty cool. Overall, it is a silly card. I thought that it would be nice to follow something more serious with something more silly in case the doomed one brought you down a bit. Now let's move on to the Silent Artisan. This guy is 2 white, 3 colors for a giant artisan. He is 3/5, and the flavor text says, on the 4th day, they pass through a forest of immense stacked stones. Althamon, youngest of the companions, called these pillars the work of a god, but the champion knew better. She quickened her pace. That's amazing. This is from the Theros block, where you have the hero's journey, kind of like Homer's Odyssey level adventure. So you have this silent artisan who is just a giant out in this sort of desert area, creating massive stone sculptures by stacking rocks and boulders that are far too large for a human to have ever held. And you can see that people who view this are in awe of it, going, these must have been made by the gods. But the champion in the flavor text is like, oh no, we're in giant territory. They actually have artists as well and beauty in their soul, but we need to move on through here because they may have beautiful souls, but they can still crush us into a fine powder as they are giants. So you can see the artwork, you can see this giant who's lifting this massive boulder, creating another one of these amazing pillar sculpture sort of things. Now, it is a little more abstract. Instead of shaping the stones, the sculpting is done through the process of stacking stones of different shapes, and you can actually see in the background there are a number of these pillars. Honestly, I find it to be very compelling, very enjoyable. The card itself is not a terribly strong card, but the flavor on the card is very strong, and I approve. Moving on, we're going to talk about another artisan from Theros. These are presented in no particular order, aside from the very first 2, which I deliberately chose, and we're going to end the video off with something connected to the artisans, but we're just going to look at them as they come. So, Artisan of Forms is also from Theros. This is 1 blue, 1 colors for a 1/1 human wizard. So this is a departure from the previous artificer styles. This is someone who uses magic for their artisanal work, and it's got heroic. Whenever you cast a spell that targets Artisans of Forms, you may have Artisan of Forms become a copy of target creature and gain this ability. And you can see depicted in the artwork, there is a big statue. There is a giant statue, or possibly, theoretically, a giant. It actually is more likely a giant behind her. It's possible this artwork is reused, so this could be a giant that she's taking the form of. This could be a statue that she's taking the form of. Both are possibilities, but you can see the gigantic statue or giant behind her, and you can see her actually pulling its face into existence with her one hand. Her one hand is outstretched in front of the creature that she's copying. Her other hand actually is creating the image of this creature as she's taking on its form. So I picture her as handcrafting the form and then pulling it over herself almost like a mask, like masking her existence. And the cool thing is this is a permanent sort of transformation. This isn't just something that lasts till end of turn. So once she pulls on the guise of another creature, she stays as that creature, but also maintains the capability of reshaping herself. But it's designed in a way where it's almost like god inspiration is required, because the heroic concept is like gods are targeting you and infusing you with magic, and as a result, you have this heroic effect. So it's like she can draw on, like she gets touched by the magic of the gods and she can draw part of that into herself and use it to reshape her entire body into any living being. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that this feels like an actual giant to me and not a statue, even though this could be repurposed artwork. But either way, very, very flavorful card, and I'm a big fan of it. Next up, we have the Grace Blade Artisan. Now this is someone who has mastered the art of the blade, and that's where their artistic sensibilities are expressed. So this is from Dragons of Tarkir. 1 white, 2 colors for a 2/3. It gets +2/+2 for each aura attached to it. Can you catch a snowflake on the edge of your blade? Her sword has snagged an entire blizzard. And that's Zogye Ujatai Mystic. So that is that's a cool bit of flavor text on the surface of it, but then when you stop and think about it for a second, you're like, can you catch a snowflake on the edge of your blade? On the edge of my blade? Well, it's like, yeah, I mean, I could just hold my sword out in the snow, and some snowflakes are just gonna land on the edge of my blade. So yes, I can. But the idea of her sword has snagged an entire blizzard, that does have some nice magic to it. And the lone monk, like training out in the winter chill on a mountaintop, this is really, really epic. The view must be incredible from where this monk is standing. They're standing in that crazy, like, wide stretched-legged pose. You can see the wind is whipping up above them. Their blade is glowing with mighty power. Honestly, this is a very beautiful piece of artwork that unfortunately is not as appreciated overall because the card itself is underwhelming. And that happens sometimes in Magic the Gathering. You'll find that cards that have gorgeous artwork end up overlooked because, well, the card's not powerful really to make enough of an impact in Standard, and so the card languishes, which is unfortunate because the idea of an artisan who creates with their blade is a very cool concept. After that, we've got what for me is a lesser exciting artisan. That is the Glint Sleeve Artisan. This is from Kaladesh, and truthfully, I'm not a huge fan of the Kaladesh block. I don't like the more tech-heavy vehicles and all that sort of thing. But I will put that aside so we can be completionists and cover all of the artisans in this video. So 1 white, 2 colors for a 2/2 Dwarf Artificer. It's got Fabricate 1. When the creature enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on it or create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. And the flavor text says, shine bright, bolts tight. I mean, it's all right. Honestly, the dwarf looks pretty cool. He's got a burly feel to him, but at the same time, his creations have both solidity and fragility to them, where it's like that armband that he has made looks solid, but it also looks like it would be easy to break. There's a level of like filigree that they do in Kaladesh that is pretty interesting to me. And what I do like about this card is the whole Fabricate adding a +1/+1 counter to him is very clearly illustrated with that gauntlet that is on his arm. That armament could easily be seen as a +1/+1 armoring counter. So I like that. And overall, the fairgrounds behind him and everything, it creates a nice scene. And I like his like French twirly villain mustache as well overall. So the card itself, I like the artwork to a degree. It's I mean, it's not too tech heavy. He's just using a wrench. So that can be a fairly low tech sort of thing. But either way, I don't have a lot to say about that one. So we're going to move on to one that I find more interesting, and that is Fairy Artisans. I enjoy the flavor of this. So Fairy Artisans is 1 blue and 3 colors for a 2/2 flyer. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under opponent's control, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. Then exile all other tokens created with the Fairy Artisans. And you can see there are 2 fairies here, and it looks like they're actually constructing a dragon. If you look at the sort of slitted reptilian eye and the way you have with like a wing kind of fanning out from its head, they're either creating a dragon or a lizard-like creature. Now, I really like the idea of fairies that are entranced by what your opponents have summoned up. So it's something like you're the one who controls these Fairy Artisans, right? So they're going to be familiar with your creations, but they're not going to be familiar with the creatures your opponents have summoned up. So they make artificial artifact versions of living creatures, but they're also fairies with a short attention span. So every time your opponent brings out a new creature, like they put out a dragon and the fairy's like, oh my god, let's build a dragon, that's so cool. And then they summon up a minotaur and the fairies are like, oh my god, a minotaur, that's so cool. And they start to pull apart all the pieces of the dragon going, oh, we gotta rebuild this into a minotaur. Come on, yank all these pieces out. Pull out all the struts and all the different bolts and we're gonna remake it as a minotaur. The flavor behind that is fun. It gives the fairies a whimsical feel, which is already illustrated in the artwork by the one upside down fairy. So the flavor on this is very, very solid to me. After that, we have the Arcane Artisan. 1 blue, 2 colors for a human wizard. So this is another magical style artisan. Pay 2 blue and a colorless and tap it. Target player draws a card, then exiles a card from their hand. If a creature card is exiled this way, that player creates a token that's a copy of that card. When Arcane Artisan leaves the battlefield, exile all tokens created with it at the beginning of the next end step. Now this one's interesting. The artwork is actually pretty interesting to me with this wizard. She has her arms extended with magical fire flaming up off of it. You can see the black smoke curling up. Now admittedly, I think her headgear looks stupid, but I do like the concept behind it, where when you tie it together with the mechanics of the cards, it's almost like she can pull things into being from non-existence. So she uses her magic to permanently erase the ability to summon up particular creatures, but then at the same time, she can pull from that imprint of non-existence and create a magical version of that creature. And that to me is some really interesting flavor, even if her headgear looks just stupid. It looks stupid, let's be honest. After that, we've got a Planeswalker Artisan. This is Shaundra in her Fire Artisan version. So she is 2 red, 2 colors for a 4 loyalty Planeswalker, a 4 loyalty Planeswalker. Whenever 1 or more loyalty counters are removed from her, she deals that much damage to target opponent or Planeswalker. +1, exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. -7, exile the top 7 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. Now, I like the fact that none of her abilities, none of her activated loyalty abilities directly do any damage. That is only done by her losing loyalty counters, which makes the fire almost like an afterthought, or it's not something she actually has to focus on creating. And so it just gives a different level to that artisan concept. I like that. Admittedly, the artwork doesn't seem that great because it's Shaundra just surrounded by some Thopters or something. I guess these are Thopters sent from Dovin Band. I don't know. The artwork is a miss for me, but I like the concept of the artisan kind of being a secondary note to what she's doing, and the fact that this card does. This is one of the few Shaundras that doesn't have an ability that directly damages things in terms of activated loyalty abilities. It's just her mastery, her artisanal fire is so ingrained into her that it's an afterthought. I like that. Moving on, we have the next card is Highspire Artisan. 1 green, 2 colorless for a 0/3 with reach. I don't understand how it has reach, admittedly, when I look at the artwork. Fabricate 1. When this creature enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on it, or create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. Now, I definitely don't know how it has reach, but I adore this artwork as an artisan. I mean, first of all, this elf dude has a fantastic outfit with all this filigree along the shoulders and everything. It's very delicate looking, and he's got this tiny little 4-legged deer or dog, with just even a little green leaf coming out of the back of it that looks so delicate, but is actually capable of being a 1/1, dealing damage to people and whatever. He's just set in this sort of arboreal garden, some sort of garden set in Kaladesh with these trees. It looks like a very peaceful place where one could turn their pursuits to true creation, true artistry instead of being worried about battle. Now again, the reach doesn't make any sense to me, but overall the flavor behind this card is, well, I love it, honestly. I absolutely adore the tiny little beast in his hand. It's fantastic. After that, we've got another green artisan. This is a merfolk shaman. This has more of a tribal kind of feel to it. 1 green, 3 colorless, 3/3. When Jadecraft Artisan enters the battlefield, target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And the flavor text says, a blade is not fully forged until it is given. And that is some cool flavor, honestly. I like the artwork on this a lot. This is an Ixalan block merfolk, and I want to do a video on the different types of merfolk because I feel like there is a wide variation of styles and types of merfolk, and it would make for a very interesting video. But the merfolk of Ixalan specifically have a tropical fish feel to them, and I absolutely adore them. I think they're fantastic. So you can see him holding his hands out. He is shaping the jade without directly touching it, and you can see all the like carvings that have gone into it. This gives kind of a feeling of like Aboriginal people to me. Now, one minor nitpick is the whole blade is not fully forged until it's given. A creature only gets +2/+2 until end of turn. These jade weapons look like they would last longer, and it feels like this flavor text and everything would fit better if this gave a +1 or 2 +1/+1 counters. But overall, I really enjoy the tribal feel of a blade is not fully forged until it is given. It's like I've crafted this blade, but the forging isn't complete until I share it with another member of my tribe. That is a cool concept that gives you an insight into the inner workings of the Ixalan merfolk and how they view themselves and the rest of the world. Very enjoyable. Now we're going to move on to our second Planeswalker Artisan. This is Nissa Nature's Artisan. So this again is another Kaladesh card. I'm not as big a fan of Kaladesh cards. 2 green, 4 colors. 5 loyalty Planeswalker. Now bear in mind this is a Planeswalker deck Planeswalker, so it is weaker than regular Planeswalkers. +3, you gain 3 life. -4, reveal the top 2 cards of your library, put all land cards from among them into the battlefield and the rest into your hand. -12, creatures you control get +5/+5 and gain trample until end of turn. Now admittedly, I like that last ability. I love big, let's go smash with our greenie boys! That's a great feeling. Now, the artwork on Nissa here, her artwork is incredible. This is absolutely beautiful. You can see her walking along an aether pipe, and when you look at the full version of this artwork, she's just gorgeous. She has a beautiful face, bright green glowing eyes. She's got her staff held behind her, and you can see nature magic flowing out of her hands. Just, oh, it is fantastic. She is wandering through a more nature-filled part of Kaladesh. I absolutely love it. She looks so beautiful. I love beautiful artwork, and she looks fantastic. Moving on, we have a complete departure from what we just looked at. Artisan of Kozilek. Now, this is an Eldrazi from Rise of the Eldrazi. This is the original Zendikar block. 9 colorless for a 10/9. When you cast Artisan of Kozilek, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it has Annihilator 2. Whenever this creature attacks, defending player sacks 2 permanents. Now, this is an artisan that deals in reanimating flesh, reanimating the dead. And you can see the Artisan of Kozilek just towering over. What's below it is a forest. This is a forest, and it is just standing, not even head and shoulders, legs above the forest. It is massive, and you can see energy arcing out of its double-pronged arm there, infusing this horrific-looking Eldrazi-esque centipede. Oh my God, this is horrific. Imagine this. Zendikar was invaded by these gigantic Eldrazi, and this is a servant of Kozilek. This isn't even the biggest Eldrazi. This is a servant of one of the Eldrazi overlords. This is a mid-tier Eldrazi. So intense. And I like how much this artisan is contrasted against all the other artisans we've seen. This one is wildly different. Oh no! My bag of chips fell. What the? Why? Why is it? I think it's scared of the Artisan of Kozilek. So let's move on so the chips won't be afraid. it won't be afraid of the Golem Artisan. It's not nearly as scary. 5 casting costs for a 3/3 artifact golem. 2 colorless, target artifact creature gets +1/+1 till end of turn. 2 colorless, target artifact creature gains your choice of flying, trample, or haste until end of turn. And the flavor text says, better living through metallurgy. So what you have is a Golem Artisan. This is a golem that's been created to improve other golems. Essentially, you can see it working on another golem. Admittedly, if you look at the tools behind it, they look like the tools of a torturer or maybe a crazy dentist more than an actual artisan. You've got crazy screws and big barbed hooks and all of that. I like the idea behind it, but I do feel like the bonuses that would be granted by this golem would last. So this is another one where, like the merfolk that we talked about, I feel like if the bonuses it gave were permanent, it would feel better. It's interesting to note that this is not considered an artificer. It is just considered a golem. It was not updated to include the artificer creature type. But you can see, instead of having a regular eye, it's got a kind of like a zoom in monocle fastened to its forehead. I do like the fact that it can also make these modifications on itself. It doesn't have to do it to other beings. It can also work on itself. So that's pretty cool. Overall, it's not a shabby artisan. The card itself, admittedly, is fairly weak. I will give that. Now, we're going to move on to a card that's not an artisan, but does mention artisans, and I felt like it tied into this video pretty well. And that is Artisan Sorrel. 1 green, 3 colorless. It's an instant. Destroy target artifact or enchantment, and then you get to scry 2, which allows you to look at the top 2 cards of your library and then decide whether you want to put them back on the top of your deck or the bottom of your deck. And the flavor text says, some seers read bones or entrails, others just like to break things. So I like the idea behind Artisan Sorrel, where it's like they've spent this time to create this magically imbued artifact. And if you think about it, the time it would take to create an artifact would be a lengthy amount of time. You can see some sort of urn or bowl being unmade, but at the same way it's being unmade, it's being infused with green mana that is then pulling the magic essence out of it and using that magic essence to read the future. That is an intense way to gain knowledge of the future. Instead of bones or other sort of prophecy styles, you literally cannibalize the magic out of items that were meant to last forever. And I love the idea behind it. If you actually look at it, it's not, the urn itself has been broken apart. It's the after image that you're looking at. So the green mana infused it, took on its shape. The original creation has broken apart, and you can see the pieces laying on the broken cobblestone, while the after image of it is being drawn away. That magic that infused and destroyed the artifact is now being pulled away to divine the future. And that is some intense flavor. It is well done. So that wraps up all the artisan cards. All right, my friends. Well, that was all of the artisans that are in Magic the Gathering currently. A lot of different variations, from the deep style to the more humorous Goblin Artisan style. I like the variety that Magic the Gathering has to offer, and it's nice to go through and appreciate these different cards for what they are, because a lot of Magic cards don't get the love, and the artwork just gets ignored. It all just gets shoved to the side. So it's nice to give it some attention and enjoy it all. Let me know what you guys think of these artisans, and if there's another video like this you would like to see, maybe something not everybody's talking about, let me know in the comments below. I want to give a big shout out to my patrons and channel members. Thank you for supporting the work that I do, and remember, my friends,
and together we are the 6 turtles of magic.